Okay, so basically the MySQL, so it's the most popular open source relational database management system, so I think I don't need to talk about this again. And if you have Windows, basically there were some tips of how to install that on your PC. Basically, you have to install, basically everyone now, you should have two software. One is Workbench and another is MySQL Server. So MySQL Server is basically where the data is stored and managed, and Workbench is the client software we are going to utilize to connect to the server and to retrieve data and to edit data and like this. So some of you actually asked whether it's okay to use a cloud-based SQL server instead of installing it on your PC. So if you have access to the cloud-based MySQL server, and if that cloud service provides all the functionality to you, then I think it's okay. But if it's not, I recommend you to install on your laptop. And for the Workbench, you must have this on your PC so that you can use it. I'm not sure whether cloud-based service will provide this one, but you can also check it. Oh, and one thing is that when you are installing MySQL Server, during the installation, probably they asked you to make the root password. So make sure that you remember that, because you need that password to connect to the SQL Server. So if you don't remember root password, you may have to delete and reinstall again, because you need that to connect to it. Yeah. Okay. So there are many of the information on the slide, but I'm going to show it by yourself. So you can use the slide information as a reference later if you don't remember. So basically, the MySQL Workbench, it provides multiple functionality. One of the things is that data modeling. Basically, you can create relational model diagram in the MySQL. And the MySQL will implement database for you automatically based on your relational model diagram, which is very powerful. And there are a lot of options for server management, and also you can run SQL queries. We are going to talk about SQL in the next class. So today we are going to focus on how to implement the table and relational structure in the MySQL. So let's try it. So basically, you can follow this approach. So first of all, let's open MySQL Workbench. So if you installed it correctly. So let me go here. And I have a MySQL Workbench here, so let's open it. So this is again the client software you are going to use to connect to your server. So if your server is installed correctly on your PC or laptop, then you will see that there is this local instance under MySQL connection. So if you see this, your MySQL is installed correctly on your PC, and you are ready to connect to your server from MySQL Workbench. If you don't see this, it is possible that there might be some problem in installation, or it is just not connected with the MySQL Workbench. So usually, if you use cloud-based MySQL, or if your organization or if your company has their own MySQL server, and if you want to connect to that server and if you want to work, what you can do is that you can click this plus icon here next to MySQL connection. So if you click this plus icon, then basically it will ask you to type some host name, basically the IP address of the server, and username, your username of that server, and password and other information. And also the port number is important. So if your company has a MySQL server and if you have to work on it by connecting to it, basically you have to ask them for IP address, port number, and the username and your user password. So those informations are required. So in this case, if we are using a MySQL server installed on our PC, we don't need to go through this step. So let me close this. And there are other options. So we are going to use this actually later. And there are other options. So here, the first option is basically the connecting to the server. So if you click this, you can connect to server. And the second option here, which looked like a relational model diagram, so this is actually EER diagram editor. So in MySQL, they call a relational model as a EER diagram, and we are going to make a relational model here so that MySQL can implement it. So let me see. Yeah, so let's try to add some diagram. So click this, the second one. So on the left sidebar, click the second option, which is EER diagram editor. And currently there's nothing because I didn't make any relational model. So if you want to add a relational model here, you can click this plus icon here next to the model. So if I click this plus icon, okay, now it will show this screen. Another thing is that because we are doing like hands-on step-by-step exercise here, when I'm going through, if you have any question or if something doesn't work, just raise your hand. Then I'll go there and I'll try to help you. So just raise your hand if there's any problem or issue. So here, basically there are some information. So here it says MyDB. So basically it's the name of a database you want to create or edit. So if you want to change it, you can double click this MyDB, and here you can change the name. So I can change the name. I'll change the name into test, something like that. So once you change the name here, you can see that the name of the database is changed. So if you make a relational model, then your database implementation will be made in this database you name it. Basically, in the database server, you can create multiple database, each one for a different purpose. So in this case, we name test database, and then I'll make relational model here. To make relational model, on the top there is an add diagram. You can simply double click this. So double click, add diagram. Then it brings me to this canvas screen. Here is the place where I am able to make a relational model. Okay, so please, So again, all the steps are shown on the slide. So if you don't remember, you can always go back to it. So there are several diagrams here. So once you go to the canvas, basically you will see that there are several diagrams are listed here, as you see here. What we are going to use mostly often is this one, which is a table, and this one, which is a relationship. So we are going to make a table and relationship in this ER diagram editor in the MySQL. So let's try to add some table and add some attributes. So adding table is quite straightforward. So again, there's this diagram. If you put your mouse cursor on it, it will say place on your table. So you can click this, just click, and you can click it again in the canvas where you want to add. So if I click again in the canvas, you can see that table is added here. Okay? So after you add a table, currently there's nothing in this table. So the second step is you want to add the attributes. To add the attributes and to change the name of table, simply double click this table. Double click, or you can right click and choose edit table. Either way is fine, so I'll just double click. Then there are many options here. So here you can choose the table name. You can change the table name as you want, and you can add more attributes here. So let me change the table name first into professor table. So let's think of a professor applying for a parking permit business case. So change the name into professor table. And if you click canvas, you can see that the table name is changed as a professor. And now let's add some attributes. So here we can add the attributes under the column name. So you can double click under the column name. And here I can put attributes. Let's put step ID first. And you can type enter. The first attribute, once you name step ID like this, and if you enter, then you will see this yellow key icon added next to the step ID. So basically the first attribute you add into table becomes a primary key automatically. So this yellow key icon means that this field is a primary key. And if you look at here the option, currently under PK, the box is checked, which means that this field is used as a primary key of this table. And let's add more. So let me step ID is there. Let me double click the next row, and let me type name and enter, and again double click, and what else? So name, office, email, phone. So let me add office. Email and phone. Okay, so we just added multiple attributes here, and as you add attributes, you will see that your table is also updated on the canvas. So you can, in the canvas, you can basically move this anywhere you want. You can also resize it so that you can see it more clearly like this. So another thing you notice is this. So next to every attribute, there is something called the data type. So currently, if you look at here or here, you can see that next to the column name, there is a data type listed like this. So basically, currently, step ID is int, and name, office, email, phone number is var character 45 like this. What it means is basically it's specifying what kind of data you can put in each field. So the int means the integer. You can only put integer type number, basically number with no decimal point. And the var character means that you can put the character, and it has a 45. So you can put 45 numbers of a character in each field. So that's how it's defined. So you can change the data type, of course, as you want. So here are some information of a kind of a frequently used data types. So I recommend you to choose one of these data type for this course and also in the real world. So int is integer number like 300 something like this, basically any number with a decimal point. Double is a number with a decimal points like this. Var character is a text information, and you can specify the number, how many character it can contain. And long text is a long text, basically any text information without limitation. Date is date only, date time and date and time. Time is time only, and Boolean is yes or no information, like this. So to change the data type, you can simply double click the data type you want to change here, and you can change into other thing. So currently, I'll just leave everything as it is because it looks fine. Okay, so that's basically how you can add a table. So I'll give you time. So let's try to add one more table permit. So I need to make this and permit number lot space, and the space is integer. Okay, so let me add it. So simply I click this and add it here and double click. And change this data type into integer here, the first one. Okay. And then let me close this table. Okay, like this. Okay, so that's it. So once basically, in this step, we are adding all the entity into table like this. And the next step is basically about making the relationship. So in the MySQL Workbench, they provide multiple options to make a relationship. So you have to be a little bit careful about what to choose here. So let me give you some explanation. So currently, if you look at here, the options are one-to-one, one-to-many like this. I mean, these are straightforward. One-to-one, one-to-many, we know what to put. There is also non-identifying relationship and identifying relationship. So these two are a little bit complex, so I'll give you more explanation. So non-identifying, identifying, it's not like an official definition, but it's more like what MySQL Workbench made to refer to different situations. So I'll give you more explanation about that later. And the last one is a relationship using existing column. So if you are not sure what to use among all these top 5, and if you want to just add a relationship based on primary key and foreign key you added into table, you can use the last option. So anyway, let me give you some information about what these options mean. The first of all, non-identifying relationship. So MySQL provides some of the options to add a relationship as a non-identifying. So non-identifying one-to-many relationship, basically you can use this option when foreign key was not added in many-sided table. So basically, here in this example, there is a professor table, permit table. To make a relationship, you have to add a foreign key here, which is a step ID here as a foreign key. But you didn't add it yet. And if you use a non-identifying relationship option, you are asking MySQL to add a foreign key automatically. So that's what it means. So if you use this non-identifying option, you can click many-sided table first, which is a professor. Then MySQL will use this step ID. And if you click one-sided table later, which is a permit, then it will add this step ID here as a foreign key and make a relationship like this. So this professor's step ID will be added here automatically by MySQL. So basically, MySQL will add a foreign key in many-sided table based on primary key in one-sided table. And you have to, one thing to note is that you have to click a many-sided table first so that MySQL know what to use as a foreign key. So let's try this. Here, one-to-many identifying relationship. Let me see. This is non-identifying relationship. So it's these two basically. So basically another thing is that non-identifying relationship is represented as a dashed line, and identifying relationship is represented as a solid line. So that's the difference. In this case, we are going to use non-identifying relationship. So choose the second relationship option, the second one, which is one-to-many non-identifying relationship. So if you put your mouse cursor on it, it will tell you which relationship option you are using. It says currently place a new one-to-many non-identifying relationship. So click this, and then click the many-sided table first. Wait. I think there's actually mistake here. So permit is many-sided table, right? And the one-sided table is a professor. So there was typo. So you have to click the table which you want to add a foreign key first. So in this case, after click this, click permit table first, and then click professor table. Then you will see that this is added now. So you can see that this relationship is added. And if you put your mouse cursor on it, it shows that the primary key of step ID is connected to foreign key, which is a professor's step ID in permit table like this. So that's it. That's how you can create a relationship in MySQL using non-identifying option. The next option is identifying relationship. So MySQL also provides an identifying relationship option, but this is slightly different. So you will use identifying option when foreign key will be part of a primary key in many-sided table. So earlier in non-identifying option, when you added the foreign key will be added. But if you want to use that foreign key also as a primary key, composite primary key of that table, you can use a this identifying relationship option. Actually, this it is not as common as non-identifying, because when you add a foreign key, usually you will not use that as a composite primary key. But anyway, the option is there, and if you want to use it, you can also click many-sided table first, which is permit, and then you can click one-sided table later, which is a professor. So, and then MySQL will add a foreign key as a part of a primary key in many-sided table. So basically, originally it looked like this, but if you use that identifying one-to-many relationship option in the many-sided table, professor's step ID will be added as a foreign key, and this will be also used as a primary key of this permit table. So permit table will have a 2 primary key. So let me show you this really quickly. So you don't need to follow this one, but let me show you how this look like. And after you create a relationship, you want to delete it, then you can just right-click on the relationship, and there's a delete option, so you can click delete, and then it will say that the foreign key automatically added by MySQL will be also deleted together. So you can click delete, then you will see that the foreign key added is deleted and the relationship is also gone now. So now if I show you the identifying relationship option, I can click this one-to-many identifying relationship, which has a solid line. And I can click the permit table and professor table. Then you can see that professor's step ID is added here as a foreign key. But it is slightly different from earlier, because first of all, there is no diamond icon here, and also this line is solid. So which means that, so if you see the diamond icon here, like earlier, diamond red icon, it means that that field is used as a foreign key only. And if you see yellow key icon, it means that that field is used as a primary key. And if you don't see anything here, it means that this field is used as a foreign key, at the same time it's used as a primary key. So if you want to be more sure, you can double click this table. So if I double click permit table, I can see all the information about the attributes here. And as you see here, it's more clear. Now you can see that these 2 fields, step ID and the permit number, both have a yellow key icon. It means that they are both used as a primary key, as you see here on the checkbox. So in this case, if you use an identifying option, basically, it's adding the foreign key as a primary key. So this permit table now has a 2 primary key as a composite primary key. So basically, it changes the structure of the table. So you have to be a little bit careful when you add and when you use identifying relationship option. And it will be very rare to use this option actually. So let me delete this. Okay. So I'm just telling you, I'm just focusing a lot here because I see that like in the previous courses, many students get confused between these 2 options. And if you are not sure, basically the non-identifying relationship option you will use mostly, and this you will use probably not that much, or maybe not even in this course. Okay, so that was a one-to-many and one-to-one relationship case. So another case is a many-to-many relationship. So earlier, when in the first part of our today's class, when we talked about how to make a relational model, we talked about those steps, to make a junction table between 2 entities, and you have to add a primary key of related tables as a primary key in the junction table. So actually MySQL has an option to add an assignment table automatically, which is a many-to-many identifying relationship option. So if you use this option, many-to-many identifying relationship in MySQL, the assignment table will be created automatically for you in MySQL. So you can choose this option, and you can choose 2 tables, and between these 2 tables, the assignment table will be created like this. So between these 2 tables, MySQL will create this assignment table automatically, which use primary key of step ID and permit number as a composite primary key in this assignment table. So let's try this. So again here we have a professor and permit table, and we want to make a many-to-many relationship between these two. So professor apply many permit, each permit can be used by many professor. Then you can just use this option, place a new many-to-many identifying relationship. So you can click this and you can choose like a professor and permit. Then the MySQL will automatically create this assignment table in the middle, which use these two primary key as their its own primary key, like this. So if I put my mouse cursor on this assignment table, it shows that it's connected with these two tables based on the primary key. So again, if you double click this assignment table, you can see the structure, and you can see that step ID and permit number are both used as a primary key with a yellow sign, yellow key icon next to it. And in this case, you want to delete a relationship, you can simply delete the assignment table. So you can click assignment table and you can right click on it, and if you choose this one, delete the professor has a permit, then this assignment table will be deleted together with the relationship. So if I choose this, then you can see that the table and the relationships are all gone. Okay, so that was basically what MySQL provides for you for convenience. And the last option is more of a traditional option, basically relationship using existing columns. So if you want to use this option, basically you have to add everything by yourself. So you have to make an assignment table by yourself. You have to add a foreign key field first by yourself. So let's think that we want to make a one-to-many relationship between these two tables. Then when we made the relational model earlier, we have to add a step ID as a foreign key into permit table. But currently permit table doesn't have any step ID attribute. So if you want to use this option, basically you have to add a foreign key first. So I can double click permit table, and here I can add a step ID field to be used as a foreign key. And here one thing you have to be careful is this. If you add a foreign key field by yourself, this foreign key field data type should be the same as the data type of the primary key here. So the primary key data type is an integer. So this foreign key which will be connected should be also integer data type. Okay, so we change that. So now the next step is that we have to connect this primary key step ID of the professor table into foreign key step ID into under permit table. So to do that by ourselves, we can choose the last relationship option, relationship using existing column. So we can click this. And once you click it, it will ask you to pick a foreign key column first. So foreign key column is a step ID in the permit table. So we click this. Once you click it, now it will ask you to pick reference column. So we are done with the foreign key column. So click pick reference column. And then now it will ask you to choose the reference column. Then now we choose step ID, which is a primary key in the professor table. Then now we are able to make the relationship. So just to show you again. So when you first click this, it will ask you to choose a foreign key. It's because it's possible in some situation multiple keys can be foreign key together. like there is a one table with two primary key as a composite primary key, then in the related table, you also have to add those two fields as a foreign key. So that's why it's asking you to choose a foreign key. But in this case, we are using. Oh, actually, the step ID is gone. So let me add it quickly. So in this case, when we choose a foreign key, there's only one attribute to be used as a foreign key. So we choose this, and we have an option to choose more foreign key, but we skip here, and we pick reference column to choose a primary key. And then we choose a primary key, and then we can make the relationship like this. So basically, that's the last option about relationship using existing columns. So if you want to have more control over your database system, and if you know what to be connected together, then actually last option will be quite useful. Okay, so it's about deleting a relationship. So I already explained to you about this. You can right-click the relationship or right-click on the assignment table, and you can delete it. And what MySQL added, like a foreign key, will be deleted together. So the next one is changing minimum cardinality. So one thing you probably noticed was this. When you look at the relationship they make, it's always that the minimum cardinality is 1. It's one of the reasons is it's because that when you actually implement a database system, the minimum cardinality doesn't matter that much actually, unless you have to specify a specific rule. That's why the minimum cardinality is always 1. But to be consistent with your ER diagram, if you want to change the minimum cardinality, what you can do is that you can click the relationship and right-click on the relationship. Then there will be option of edit relationship. So click and choose edit relationship. Then you will see that this menu appear on the bottom. And if you look at the bottom here, there are two tabs. The second tab is a foreign key. So click the foreign key tab here. Then here, you can change the relationship type. So currently, on the permit side, the mandatory is checked, and the professor side, the mandatory is checked. By unchecking or checking this mandatory box, you can change the minimum cardinality. Because if you remember last time when we talked about the relationship cardinality, we talked about optional 1, mandatory 1. So that's what it means. So if I uncheck a mandatory 1 on both box, and if I click the canvas, I can see that the relationship minimum cardinality is changed into optional. So that's it. That's how you can change the cardinality information. So basically, that's all about how you can create the relational model in the ER diagram editor. So you can create any relational model you want in the ER diagram editor, basically. And another thing is that there are also additional materials you can utilize in the ER diagram editor. You can use the layer, text, image, colors to make it more user-friendly. So basically, the concept is this. So this ER diagram, relational model you make in the MySQL, especially if in the company or organization, if people work together, they are going to share the same diagram. So the documentation is very important. So in the organization, you have a big database system, then the model will be very complex. So you have to you want to specify which part is for what and what is for the other parts right there. So for the documentation purpose, the MySQL provides some of the options. You can decorate this canvas. So on here, there is a place a new layer. So you can put some layers like this. And if I double click the layer, I can change the name. Like this is the business event of a professor. Apply permit, something like that. So you can specify that. And I can change the color into something else. And also you can add like additional text or image, other things. So basically it's all here. So next one is place a new text, and next one is place a new image. So if I click place a new text, then I can add some business rules here. So I can say that business rules are So just to give an example, I can add something like this. So I can add some business rules here so that it can show like this. So basically I can make it more easy to read by other people. So I say that this part is for a specific business event and the related business rules are this. That's why I designed it in this way. So in the designing database, in the initial step, so this kind of documentation will help to communicate with other team members and other colleagues in the company or organization. So that's some of the things you can utilize here. So because these are just documentation, actually like a layer and the text you added here will not affect anything in the implementation. Only thing will affect in actual implementation will be the table and the relationship structure. Okay, so there are also other options. So after you finish like making diagram, you can save this. So you can go to the file and save. So I can save the model as like a test or as you want. And also you can export this. Under file there's an export option. You can export it as an image or PDF file like this. So you can share it with other people who doesn't utilize this kind of software. So there are many options there, and the next type is this. So currently, we designed the relational model in the EER diagram editor, but by designing EER diagram editor, so basically by designing relational model there, doesn't mean that you have a database implemented. So once you finish designing relational model there, the last step is you have to ask MySQL to implement it. Implement as you designed. So this is something called forward engineering. So basically, it's the step to transform relational data model into a physical database implementation. So it's very easy. So you can just follow this. So I have this relational model. I want this relational model to be implemented in my database. Then simply go to the top. There's a database option here in the middle on the top menu. There's a database. And if you click database, there are many options. And in the middle here, there's something called the forward engineer. So find this. Under database menu, there's an option called the forward engineer. This one, the forward engineer. Okay, so once you find it, simply click it. Then it shows some information. Basically, it asks you where you want to implement this database. So yeah, I just leave it as default because I already have a database installed on my PC. And the first option is a local instance, which means a database on my computer. So everything is correct. Then in the future, if you work in the organization, basically you simply have to put the IP address of a database server in the company and the port number and the user account and like this. So you can just change this part. So everything is correct, then you can click next. So click next. Then it asks you some information here. You can just leave it as default and you can click next. So there are more information. Basically, it's saying that after, based on your relational model, it will make two objects, basically two tables. So that's correct. So click next again. And the last step, it shows this. Basically, it's the SQL code MySQL generated for you to create your database. So there are two ways of creating tables and relationship in the MySQL database server. One way is using this forward engineering. So you can design database system based on your relational model. The second way is a more traditional way, which is utilizing SQL and use create table SQL code. So basically, it shows how your SQL code will be performed based on our relational model. So it's all there. So if it looks correct, then you can click next. And then it says that it connected to database and it did some several things. And it says finally, the forward engineer finished it successfully. That means that our database is now implemented in the server. So everything looks good, then simply click close. Then that's it. You implemented your first database server. So how to check it, whether your database is implemented correctly? You have to go to your database server. So let's go to our database server. So click this home icon on the top left corner here. So if you click this home icon, then it will go back to this menu. And here, choose the first option, which is Dolphin with the database. And here, let's connect to our database server, which is here. So if you click this, it will connect to your database server. If it's your first time connecting to your server, it will ask you the root password. So you can type the root password, then it will be connected. And on the left side here, it will show the database which you have on your server. So there's also a refresh button. So after you update something, you can click refresh button. But here I already see this test database, which I just made in the ER diagram editor. So if you double click test database, then there are tables. So if I open tables, I can see that there's a permit table and professor table implemented here. So if I click professor table, I can see that it has this kind of a field. So basically, test database is created. There is a permit and professor table. And for professor table, it's made with 5 attributes like this, and step ID is a primary key. And if I click permit table, similar information you can see there. So here basically, permit number is primary key of permit table, and step ID is a foreign key because it shows as the bold character. So that's it. So that's how you can check whether your database is implemented correctly. So basically, if you make a relational model like what I showed you earlier, any complex one, and if you use the forward engineering, the MySQL will implement your database based on the relational model. So that's how you can create your database. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is synchronization. So it is fairly possible that you created your database, and later you found that you missed something in your relational model. So let's say that in this case, I want you to add the department information in the professor table as an attribute, but in the beginning I didn't do it. So I want to change the model. Then you can use the synchronization option. Basically, here, so let me close the local instance. So let me close the MySQL instance here by clicking close. And then let me go back to the ER diagram, which we created earlier. So here, what I want to do is that I want to add an additional attribute into the professor table. So I double click professor table to add additional attribute here. So double click here and let me add department like this. Okay, so now here department is added. So I made changes here in the relational model, and it will not be reflected into the database automatically. So we have to do synchronization. So after you make change, you can simply go back to this database option on the top. And here, there's this option on the bottom called the Synchronized Model. So under database on the top, there's this option called the Synchronized Model. So simply click this. Then again, it will tell you which server your database it is. So we can use the same option. And let me click next. And there are some options, we can skip it, just click next. Just use the default. And then it connected to database to fetch some information. And it was successful, so click next. Then now it shows which database we want to synchronize. So basically it's a test database. So it's selected correctly. So let me click next. Okay, so click next one more time. So now it tells you this. So we choose the test database, and based on comparing the implementation in the database server and our changes in relational model, it's saying that these two tables will be updated, professor table and the permit table. So which is correct? So let's click next. And it shows you again the code the MySQL will use to update our implementation. So basically it's using alter table SQL code to make changes in the table we had changed in the relational model. Everything looks correct. So choose execute. And then it says that synchronization completed successfully and it's finished. So we can click close. And then we can go back to the our database, and we can see whether our changes were reflected correctly. So go back to the home icon, connect to the MySQL server, and here to make sure, let me click this refresh icon. So click refresh here, and if I click professor table, I can see that now there is a department field added here. So basically, if you have any changes in your relational model, you can change the relational model, and you can use the synchronize feature to update your database implementation. Okay, so that's about the synchronization basically. Another thing I want to talk about is reverse engineering. So there is also reverse engineering feature provided in MySQL. Basically, what it means is that it's transforming a physical database implementation into relational data model. So sometimes people need this feature because some company may have operated for a long time, but they didn't have a good relational model documented, or maybe they lost those files. So they have a database already company is using, but they may not have enough or good documentation of their relational model. Then instead of looking at table one by one and creating by yourself, you can simply utilize a reverse engineering feature. Then you can translate database into relational model. So for example, let me show you this. So you can use that feature here in this database. So you have to first choose the database you want to translate into relational model. So you can choose a test database if you want, but in this case I have this Sakila database, so let me use this. So I made this before, so just for an example. So I double click this Sakila database to select it. So I double clicked it, so the Sakila database is shown as a bold character. It means that I selected this database, and then I go to the database option on the top, and here there's a reverse engineer feature here. So I can use this reverse engineer. So you can choose any database and you can try if you want. And then it shows you like a similar information. So currently I'm in this database. So click next. And click next. It asks which database I want to change into relational model. So I'll not use test database, I'll use Sakilla. So I choose Sakilla database in this case. And click next. And to finish it, and click next. And it says that there are 16 tables in the Sakilla database. Okay, execute. So it's done. And click next. And click finish. Then I see that the relational model is made automatically based on the Sakilla database. So this feature is actually really useful, especially if the company didn't do a good job in documenting their relational model. And as a software engineer, if you want to look at their design of a relational database, then this feature is actually quite useful. So this is basically the database system of Sakilla company, which is a company renting a movie to the customer. Yeah, so it's a very simple database. Okay, so let me go back to the slide. Okay, so yeah, I explained about this, how to connect to the database. And also on the top left corner, there are many server management options, which I will not go details in this class today. Okay, now let's talk about this, adding data into table. So far, what we talked about was how to make the table and the relationship in the database system, basically, based on the relational model. However, we didn't add any data yet. So there are multiple ways to add data in your table. The first way is what I'm going to show today. Basically, we can use the interface in the MySQL to add data. And another way is that we can also use SQL, which we are going to talk more about that later. Not today, but in the next class. So there are multiple ways. So let's try to add some data. So let's say that you want to add some simple data in your table in the MySQL. Then let me actually close all this. Let me go to the home. So here, let me click the local instance to connect to my SQL server on my laptop. And let me open test database, which we just created. Let me double click. And let me open table. Then there are two tables, permit and professor. Let's say that we want to add some field, simple data into professor table. Then you can right click on the professor table first. And the first option is select row. So basically, if you click select row here, it will show all the data stored in your table. So if I click select row, it will show nothing basically, because we don't have any data stored here. So if you want to add some simple data, you can just double click here and add data. So I can double click here on the step ID and 1111 and name key. And office CYT, email kkim at CUHK, phone number 1234, something like this. So you can type any number, and then you can enter to type more number here, or you can just use your mouse to click here. So let me add more number and more information for other professor. Something like this. So let me just add two row of information here. So just to add the information, you can type there, and there's an apply button. So after you type everything here, it's not saved in your database yet. If you want to put this information on your database, you can click apply button here, and then it will show you this SQL code, which is supposed to add data in your table. So it usually insert into SQL, and if you click apply and click finish, then it's done. So now if I close this professor, and right-click the professor table again, and if I click select row again, now I see that there are 2 rows of data added into this table. Also, you can use other approach here. So we use the result grid, but you can go to form editor to edit it too. It's similar. So if I click form editor, then I can look at data like this. And if you click this plus icon, you can add additional data. But I'll skip this part for the timing, and you can try this later by yourself. So these steps are also again shown on the slide, so you can always refer back to it. So basically, the thing is this. So the MySQL Workbench provides a lot of useful but easy to use feature. And whenever you do something, and whenever you apply or whenever you try to perform something, it shows SQL code. So basically, if you don't remember how to use SQL to code something you want, you can try this and you can see the SQL code and you can utilize that information to make your own SQL code too. So that's another advantage of using this workbench. And for the SQL code, more details we are going to talk about in the next class. Okay, another option is this. So let's say that you implemented your database and you added multiple data into your tables. So basically, you have a database implemented and you have data stored inside your database. And you want to sometimes share your database with other people, or you want to migrate your database into different server. So sometimes that kind of situation happens. Then MySQL actually provides multiple tools and options for that. And here, I'm going to show you one simple option of sharing your database with other people. Basically, there's this feature called data export, and you can use this to migrate your database implementation together with all of your data into another server or share it with other people. So let's try this. So actually, the UI is a little bit changed from the last time when I used MySQL. Basically here, all the database is listed here. And I have 2 tabs, administration and server. Yeah, I think depending on the version of MySQL Workbench or depending on your system, the location of this administration and schema will be slightly different. So in my case, it's here. Some of you, it might be here on the top. So find it. So basically, the schema means the database. So in the database system, for database, sometimes we use the term schema to refer to the database. And there's administration. So if you click this, it will show you the option of managing your server. So there are multiple information here. You can check your server status, and you can also manage user and other information all here. And here, what we are going to use today is a data export option here in the middle. So under administration, under management, there is a data export option here. So find it and click it. So if I click this, it shows this option here. So basically, we can export data into file or different server like this, and you can choose which data you want to export. Let's choose the test database which we just created and added some data. So let me click test database, and if I also click this, if I also choose a test database, it shows there are multiple tables here. So if you don't want to export all the tables, you can choose a certain tables you want to export. So in this case, I choose the test database, and I choose all the tables like this. And on the bottom here, there are some options: export to dump project folder, or export to self-contained file. So in this class, I'll choose the second option. Export to self-contained file. What it means is that if you choose the second option, basically your database structure and all the data inside your database will be summarize it into SQL file. So you can use the SQL file to implement your database and repopulate your data into different place or share with other people. So because we are using the simple database structure, we are going to choose the second option, export to self-contained file. And here you can change the name into different place. So I can click this 3 dots here to save SQL file into different location. And I save it on the desktop and say that it's a test like this. Then basically the file, SQL file, will be saved here on the desktop as a test.sql file. And there are 2 options here. Check both of them. So the first is create dump in a single transaction, basically making a self-contained file. The second option is include create schema. So basically, if you don't choose this second option, only data will be stored in the SQL file. If you choose the second option, both of data and the database structure will be stored in the SQL file. So after that, you can click Start Export. So if I click the Start Export option, it will be performed. And it says that export to the file has finished. Then that's it. So it's done. So like I can close this. And if I go to my desktop, I will see that there is this test.sql file here, created here. So what I'm going to do now is that I want to check whether this export is done correctly. So I will open the database and I will delete my database first. So there is this test database. I right click on it and I click drop schema. Drop schema means deleting database. So I will delete it. And I can check SQL first, but I'll just drop. So I'll click drop now to delete test database. So in my database server, test database is deleted now. And now I'm going to open that SQL file created earlier. So I go to the file and open SQL script. There are multiple options. I'll choose the open SQL script to open the test.sql, which is created earlier by data export. And you can see that this is the file. Basically, if you look at the code a little bit, basically it's creating the database called the test, and it has a multiple table structure like this. The permit table will be made like this, and also later it will add this data. So this SQL code contains all the information about your previous database, and I'm going to execute this file with this lightning icon here. So here there's a lightning icon. If you click this SQL file will be performed. So if I click this, so MySQL will so as you see here, MySQL performed many of the code like this. And if I click refresh icon here next to schema, then I can see that test database is created again with 2 tables, permit and professor, and the structure is the same. And if I right click and select row on the professor table, I can see that the data is still there. So that's how you can export your database.